Hello, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and welcome back to the Game Development for Complete Beginners tutorial series. Now, just before we jump in and start to code things, I want to go over one more optional topic, and that is choosing an editor or an IDE. Now, the line between an editor and IDE is very, very blurry. And let me just say something right up front. If you want to just work in a text editor and run love from the command line like I showed you in earlier videos, feel free. You don't have to use an IDE or an editor at all, but there is a lot of productivity savings here. Now, one of the challenges when learning anything is to try and minimize complexity. And so you don't want to learn too many things at once, and adding a really confusing IDE on top of things is definitely adding a layer of confusion. But on the other hand, an IDE can do a lot for you, or a properly configured text editor can do a lot for you. Now, first I should explain what IDE actually stands for. It stands for Integrated Development Environment. And generally what it always includes a text editor of some form. But generally it has a little bit more functionality on top of that. Things like syntax highlighting, auto-completion, project management, a lot of times source code integration for sharing your project with other developers or doing backups, etc. And oftentimes also a debugger, a very invaluable thing. Now, I've put together a list of either text editors that have additional functionality that come close to being IDEs, or actual full-blown IDEs that work with Lua and Love. And that list is available here on Gamefromscratch. I'll give this URL down in the comments below, but we're going to look at a couple of these examples today. So a few of your options you've got are ZeroBrain Studio, IntelliJ with a set of plugins. So you'll see here in the instructions I have IntelliJ with Lua and Love 2D plugins. You have to install that Lua plugin and Love 2D plugin into IntelliJ before it'll work. And that's very common. For example, here's Sublime Text. There's a Love 2D package for it. The Atom Editor has a Love IDE package, etc. So I've got links to all of the add-ons that you would use for the other editor to make it an ideal Lua programming environment. And so your options again are ZeroBrane, IntelliJ IDEs, Sublime Text, Atom Editor, Notepad++, Eclipse, Dakota, Visual Studios with the Babe Lua plugin. Now, that is by no means comprehensive. There's a ton of other editors out there. There's the old Mac daddy of them all, Vim and Emacs, but my God, there's a lot of complexity. So unless you're already familiar with those ones, don't even think about it. You can use Notepad if you want. You can use the native application from Linux or Windows or Mac, whatever you're comfortable editing in, you can do so, and just fire up a command prompt or fire up a terminal window and run your code that way. If that's how you want to go about it, do that. So I want to really strongly make that point. But I will now show you what these bring to the table. Now, here are a couple of them. First off, here's Visual Studio. Now, when I said something about being complex, Visual Studio is probably way too complex. So unless you already have experience with Visual Studio, take it off the table. But what Visual Studio does have is you do get the ability to debug. You do get code highlighting. You do get all those other things. But Visual Studio also does C++ development, C# development, Visual Basic development, F# development, etc. Database integration, team integration, all kinds of things. And a lot of those you don't need, and it brings a lot of complexity to the table. But if you already know Visual Studio, it's a great choice for Lua and Love Lua and Love development. But as a beginner, get rid of it. Now, the nice thing though is Visual Studio is available for free as a community version, but again, as a beginner, don't even think about it. Now, next up we've got here's Atom in action. Now, Atom is a nice modern editor. Now, my only beef with Atom, to be honest, is I find it slow. It's slow to start up. It's slow to do things. It's built on top of JavaScript, and sometimes that shows. Sometimes it's a little bit too slow for my liking. But here we can perfectly see what it brings that a normal text editor doesn't. First off, you'll have auto tab in, so you can get this nice formatted code. It will automatically deal with it for you, and you can do things quickly, like, you know, tab things forward and back, like so. So it is an editor that's designed around dealing with source code. All of the editors you'll see today are designed around dealing with source code, whereas your default editors such as Notepad certainly are not. Now, the next thing you'll see here is syntax highlighting. So you don't know what these particular things mean yet, but once you do understand, having this color highlighting for different things is very, very useful. We'll go through later on what a function is, why this value is blue, why these values are gray, why this value is green versus orange. But once you do know the basics of the language, that color coding is very useful. It tells you at a glance that something is a function, that something is a constant, that something is a variable, etc. Again, I will explain what all those things are in a little bit, so don't worry specifically about that. Just know that that is very useful functionality. Now, what is incredibly useful, especially for a beginner, but I can't live without it at this point, I've been coding for 20 years, is auto completion. So here you can see as I'm typing, so I type the name love, which again, I will explain exactly what that is in the future, but you can see it gives all the options that are available. So if we're working with video, we can go, oh, video. So then do a dot again. Okay, I get nothing. So let's do graphics instead. Graphics. And then dot, now you can see I can call art, I can call pop, I can call draw, I can call push, etc. Now this is called code completion or auto completion, and it is invaluable. So it keeps you from having to look at, okay, what do I need to call here, what do I need to call there? And I would say that in my life, auto completion keeps me from having to go to the help or the reference material probably 80 to 90% of the time. It is a huge time saving. And another big thing that's going on, see how I'm in the middle of writing this line of code here? And then we've got this red dot and the squiggly underline. Now, well, that's because I just screwed things up by not finishing this line. And it created an error. So we can see as we're writing, so we've got a Lua parse error going on, that there is an error in your code. Now, if I get rid of this line, boom, it's gone. We're back to being good again. So this process, often called linting or real-time parsing, is another big thing that code editors will give you that a normal text editor won't. So this here is Atom. Again, this is completely free. The nice thing actually is every single program on that list on Gamefromscratch, every single thing I showed you right here, including every single plugin, completely free. So cost is a non-factor in all of this. So that is Atom. I'll get rid of it now. Next up, I'm going to show you this one, mostly because it's what I am going to be using. This is called IntelliJ, and it actually was started life as a Java IDE. So this is mostly for Java development, but there are plugins here, and they've added support for just about every language you can think of inadvertently. So there is a Lua plugin, and there is a Love plugin, so you can get the same things. You see here, you've got the syntax highlighting, you've got the formatting, you've got the color, syntax changes, etc. And once again, you get the nice code completion so you can see what is going on. Now, this one does not give you the ability to debug, but it does give you the ability to run directly here. So you can see I've created a Love configuration, and I just press play, and there's my code running. So I don't have to go out to a command prompt or a terminal window and run love space my file. It just works. So it's nicely integrated, and it does, this little play button actually over time will save you a huge amount of time. And on top of that, there's a bunch of tools in here for doing things like refactoring or changing your code, doing really complex find and replaces, that kind of stuff. Probably not that important to you initially, but as your project gets bigger and bigger in scope, it becomes more and more important. Now, I'm going to show you IntelliJ. I don't actually recommend it because I find it overly complex for beginners. So unless you already have experience with IntelliJ, there's just a lot of a learning curve here, at least initially. So I wouldn't use IntelliJ, but I'm going to be using IntelliJ for all of my videos with you. So I wanted you to know what I was actually using and why I'm using it. And I'm not using it because it's the best choice. In my opinion, the best choice is coming up next. I'm using it because it has a display mode option. So I can come in here and go to View and Presentation Mode. And it gives me this nice full screen window. And I'll be using this a lot when I'm dealing with you guys for showing you code examples, etc. So that is the kind of functionality that a lot of these IDEs bring to the table, is this presentation mode type functionality. And it is very, very useful for making it so you can read the code that I'm writing. So that is actually going to be the reason why I personally am using IntelliJ, but I don't necessarily recommend it for a beginner. Now finally, my recommendation for a beginner is this guy right here. Not the prettiest on the list by any means whatsoever, but it's pretty straightforward. It has a bunch of starter code in there that you can go in and play around with. But this is called ZeroBrain Studio. It's completely free, but it is a donation-based thing. So if you do like it and you appreciate the developer's work, do consider giving him a donation. It's available on the website. And again, I linked all these from the Gamefromscratch web's link I gave you earlier, so you can go there from that link. Again, you can download this completely free, and this guy brings a lot of things to the table. Now, first off, this and Dakota are the only two on here that were written specifically for writing Lua code. So this is an IDE just for Lua, whereas we saw Visual Studio is a C++ or C# IDE that has a Lua plugin. IntelliJ, same deal. It's a Java IDE that has a Lua plugin. ZeroBrane was written from day one to work with Lua, and this has a lot of advantages. First off, we get all the stuff that we want. So for example, we have it automatically highlights code. We got this thing called code folding. So you can see right here, I can press that and I can expand down this block right here. I'll explain why that is a block later on. But code folding is nice because you can quickly get your code into a very easily managed size by folding code down, etc. You have code completion. So for example, I can come in here and go hero dot. I should be getting code completion. All right, there should be code completion. I guess I just don't have it on. So there we go. So for certain objects anyways, there is code completion in there. So you do get this nice handy quick reference of what the methods and functions and variables available that are predefined are as you're typing your code. So very, very, very useful. Now, one thing that Love has that very few of the other options have is debugging. Now, I will explain debugging later on. Don't worry about this too much. But this is a very powerful feature. I'll give you a very, very quick preview of what I mean. So here is a bit of Lua code. It's one of the samples that actually comes with ZeroBrain Studio. And ZeroBrain setup, you can configure it to work with Love or Lua very, very easily out of the box. And if you guys need it, I can do a getting started with ZeroBrain Studio video. So let me know and I can follow up with that if it is needed. But for the most part, it's a pretty straightforward process getting started and going. But what is nice is with the debugger, I can come in here, for example, so grab this line and I'm going to hit this button, and what this is called a breakpoint. I'll cover this in more detail later on, but what we can do now is we can actually run our code. So here is our code running. You can see here is the line it is currently running on, and we're running interactively. So basically our code is running in this editor as it's running. So you can see here's the window of our code in the background, and I'll just go ahead and resume here, and you'll see it hit that breakpoint. So our code is now on this line. You can see it highlighted here. And what I can do now is I can hover over values, such as hero here. All right, you're making my demonstration tricky. All right, let me just try this one more time. All right. So there you go. So I can hover over hero, and you can see the values that are in that variable. Very, very powerful. So here I can also look at arg. Arg is another variable, and if I hover over it, I can see the values in arg. This is debugging, and this is what you do when things go bad. And this is unfortunately something you're going to run into very early on. And learning good debugging skills is invaluable. I'll actually link something I did a long time ago on learning the basics of debugging. I'll link it down below as well. So if you want to learn a bit more about debugging, head on down. Now, when we get a little further on in the series, I'll actually do a dedicated tutorial on debugging your code. It is an invaluable skill and one that too many people learn too late in life. But the key thing here is ZeroBrane has it out of the box, and it works perfectly with Lua. So that is a great combination, and this will save you tens to hundreds to thousands of hours over your career. Once you learn how to use a debugger properly, it is essential to figuring out how your code is going wrong, or when you're just starting out, how your code is actually working. The ability to come in here and jump through your code one line at a time and see how it's going to interact or how it's going to perform is a very, very valuable ability or feature. So that's why I represent ZeroBrane. ZeroBrane has this great integrated package. It's dedicated, it's built for Love, it's built for Lua. It has code highlighting, it's got autocomplete, it's got syntax highlighting, it's got code editing tools, it's got code folding like we saw earlier, and it has this debugging support. So all those things combined, plus its ease of use, is what makes me recommend it for you. So if you have no other options or you can't make a decision, use ZeroBrane. It's sort of kind of the de facto default, and this is where I would recommend going. Now, if you do run into problems with getting it up and going or are a bit confused, again, let me know and I will put it in the comments down below. So that's it. That is the available options, or at least the majority of the available options for doing Lua and Love development in either a text editor plus or an IDE of some form. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you don't, you are probably making your life more difficult than it needs to be. So if you just want to use Notepad, especially for your first couple of programs, do so. But realize that there is a lot of value in using these programs. So you're going to want to learn this, if not right away, very, very soon. So I hope you enjoyed that. See you all later. Bye.